In 1983, a large-scale recession hit the video game industry. Many factors contributed to the collapse of the fledgling second generation of home video game consoles, but one game tends to fall into the crosshairs of blame. No matter how much we want to romanticize the power of one game toppling a whole industry in its prime, the problem just wasn't one bad game, it was dozens of bad games. There were many consoles on the market, and all of them had a steady stream of games, good and bad. The bad games were the problem. They languished on the shelves, taking up valuable space and cutting into the profits of stores. When the stores tried to send back their video game stock that wasn't selling, the two options that they had were getting their money back or replacing the stock with new product. Sadly, a lot of production companies didn't have new stock to replace the old with, so in returning the store's money, many production companies went bankrupt and shut their doors. Old and new stock alike soon found its way on clearance sections and bargain bins, which lowered the reputation and value of the whole video game industry. Couple that with the lower prices of home computers, and retailers had finally had enough. This was the beginning of the end, the beginning of an almost 3-year slump in the world of home video games. But I'm not here to talk about the super secret landfill in Alamogordo, New Mexico, or the video game crash in 1983. No, I'm here to talk about the great games released for the Colecovision during this time. Hi, welcome to sentiMENTAL. My name is Rob, and this is a continuation of the top 5 Colecovision games of 1982 episode that I did a few episodes back. Now, 1983 is a negative landmark year for video games. It was when the huge crash started, and something that it didn't recover from until 1985, but we'll get into that later. Now, 1983 for the Colecovision was a great year. A lot of the big arcade games at the time were making their way to the system. Now, my top 5 here are all classic arcade games in their own right, but I was able to play them at my house or my parents' friend's house and actually make some headway with them. In the arcade, when you're feeding quarters into the machine, it eventually ran out, and where you were was where you were for weeks or months later. And it's not like there were save points or codes to put in. You had to start all over again and waste all those quarters all over again. Anyway, before we get started with number 1 on the list, here's the commercial for it.
Donkey Kong, and now I'll get you too, Junior.
I'm Donkey Kong Jr., and that's my papa. I'm trying to save him, and boy, do I need your help.
Nintendo's Donkey Kong Jr., the arcade game, is now the Super Home video game.
Save your papa, huh? Save yourself first.
He's chasing me with snapping jaws, and I could fall.
Help Donkey Kong Jr. save his papa on your Colecovision, Atari 2600 VCS, or Intellivision video game system.
Game players everywhere, please help me save my papa.
Now, after seeing that crazy commercial, here's the game itself, Donkey Kong Jr. Now, this was a game that I actually felt like I excelled at for some reason. I loved it. And that intro, I don't remember that, and that's awesome. Anyway, here we are climbing up, dropping fruit on different little steel traps and bugs and, I don't know, little crocodiles or whatever they are. But as much as I love the original Donkey Kong, I love Donkey Kong Jr. even more. Now, I stumbled upon this in the arcade way after I played it on the Colecovision. So I tried to do the tips and tricks that I'd learned while playing it on the Colecovision, but it didn't work that way. I totally got schooled time and time again and wasted quarter after quarter. Now, let's call back here. Mario's up at the top, or Jumpman at this time, probably. No, he was Mario because of the Donkey Kong cartoon. But take a look at the little trampoline or spring jump that's a staple in the Mario games. How it looked then and how it looks now. Not much has changed. Now, speaking of the Donkey Kong cartoon, Donkey Kong Jr. also had a cartoon. Donkey Kong Jr. was, it seemed like, the bigger Nintendo mascot at the time. He had stuffed animals, he had t-shirts, other odds and ends. But he's gone nowadays. He's erased from history. I mean, I guess his closest comparison would be Diddy Kong, but they're nowhere the same. I mean, I don't know if Nintendo did away with him because they didn't want Donkey Kong to have a kid. They wanted him to keep being funky and cool. But that is an awesome character that has pretty much disappeared in the history of video games. Now look at this level with the electricity. This was crazy. The one I always loved was the shimmying up the lock level. But anyway, we've talked enough about Donkey Kong Jr., so let's move on to number 2 on the list. Number 2 on the list is Popeye, made by Parker Brothers. Man, I love that digitized Popeye theme. Anyway, video games were so popular that even companies like Parker Brothers threw their hat in the ring. Now, Popeye, as you can see, he's running up and down these steps, which kind of harkens back to Donkey Kong to a degree. And he's collecting hearts that are coming from Olive Oil because she needs saved. Because, as usual, Pluto has kidnapped her. So you go up and down trying to collect these hearts, and there'd be spinach cans that would pop up that would allow you to knock the crap out of Pluto. And I can't remember, but the boxing glove up there, or the speed bag, when you would hit it, I think it was a hive of bees would drop down on Pluto. Anyway, these levels were very long. It seemed very tedious. For the hearts would take forever to fall, but when you were actually running from Pluto, they seemed to go very slowly. Now, as you can see, the second level here, Olive Oil captured yet again, but she's singing. And you have to catch her musical notes and fill the bar up at the top. Oh, here we go. He gets the spinach. Oh, you better run, Pluto. Uh-oh. Knock you into next week. Pow! Anyway, as you can see, this actually has other characters, too. In the first level and this one, you can see the Sea Witch pops out and chucks bottles. But you also have Wimpy at the bottom, who does the teeter-totter that shoots you up to Sweet Pea at the top. As I said, these levels could seem very tedious while you were waiting for stuff to fall down. But then when you really needed them, it felt like things were speeding up way too fast. And you had to go collect them in the water at the bottom. Now, the last level was Pluto's ship. And you had to spell help. She would drop H-E-L-P down, as I guess she's screaming it, help, help. And each time you collect a letter, a rung of a ladder would continue to go up to where she is in the crow's nest. So, as you build the ladder, you can finally climb it to the top at the end and save her. This is a game that I think us kids of the 80s and 70s appreciate more than probably kids nowadays. because Popeye was very much a part of our lives, and it was probably a part of all of our parents' lives too. The cartoon still ran in syndication when we were growing up. The black and white ones all the way up to the color ones. And they even did a newer cartoon, Popeye and Sons, I think, or Son, in the 80s. So Popeye is very much still a part of our lives. Nowadays, I don't know if kids even know who he is. I mean, Universal has a rapid ride based on Popeye, but other than that, you really don't see too much of him anymore. Anyway, after you beat the game, it would start over, a little bit more difficult. And this was a game that I loved playing, and I actually felt that I was good at it, if you will. There weren't that many games that I was good at, but I think by 1983, they were more self-explanatory, and the graphics were better, that I could see what the heck I was actually doing. Popeye eventually came out for the Nintendo, and I loved playing it on that too. Qbert. This was a game that I loved playing in the arcade, and the most awesome thing is when you would fall off the map, you would hear a loud knock within the cabinet. I really don't know how they accomplished it, and I'm sure I could read up on it nowadays, but I really don't want the magic to be taken away. On the Colecovision, I remember playing it all the time, like most of the games on this list. There's just something so satisfying about filling up the pyramid with the colors when you change them, and something even more devilishly fun when you jump on the little circle disc there and fly back up to the top and you see the snake fall off the side. Like Donkey Kong Jr., Qbert was a kind of popular cartoon growing up in the Saturday Super Arcade. But what was weird was they tried to make it like 50s-esque, where Greaser, he was wearing I think he wore a Leatherman coat, but the bad guys wore leather, and yeah, it was kind of weird. But anyway, I love the game, and I love its use of classical music. And one of the cool things was, as you can see, that when you die, you don't have to start the map over again. It was where you left it, so you could try to continue changing the colors where you were at. Oh, these little sideway guys. And of course, the noise he makes when he falls off. Now, later levels, and of course there's cussing. The later levels, you had to change the tiles multiple colors. Those got to be pretty hard, but those were fun. Qbert, a game that I loved in the arcade and I loved playing at home. Number 4 on the list is Pitfall, made by Activision. This was a game that actually came out in 1980 for the arcades, and yet again, it was a game that I don't ever really remember playing in the arcades, but I played the crap out of it at my parents' friend's house. They were the cool friends, the ones that were in their 20s but still played video games, went to concerts, had a huge record collection, and they played D&D, so that's awesome. Anyway, I loved playing this game endlessly at their house. I don't know what there is to say. I mean, Pitfall is a classic. It was one of the games that a lot of people contribute to the crash because it was so popular in the arcades that Atari mass-produced the crap out of it. And they may have overstretched themselves because not everyone bought it that they expected. That and Pac-Man. They thought were going to set records left and right, but the sales were kind of lukewarm. Anyway, Pitfall, major part of my childhood. I mean, I even have a t-shirt of Pitfall. I love it so much. But it's a game, I mean, you'd have to memorize different maps or different screens, I should say, because you never knew what was going to be coming out. Barrel could come out at any time. Quicksand could just appear. And scorpions down below in the little tunnel section. That was also innovative about it because, I mean, it's a side scroller, maybe one of the first. Like I said, Smurfs was for the Colecovision. At least for home consoles, it was one of the first side scrollers. But you had an upper and a lower level. And you had different platforming things, albeit not climbing big things like we would eventually see in Mario Brothers, Super Mario Brothers, sorry. But jumping over the crocodiles and the barrels and swinging on the ropes. My imagination would just run away with me, pretending I was Indiana Jones. By the way, why didn't they do the Indiana Jones game more like this instead of what they did do? Anyway, Pitfall. Classic, love it. Can't wait to play it again. Number 5 on the list, Frogger. Now this is another classic game, and just to speak volumes of how classic it is, there's a whole episode of Seinfeld based on it. Anyway, the point of Frogger is to make it across a busy road, then make it across a pretty fast-flowing river to make it back to your little home on the other side. You needed to return 5 frogs back to their little home in order to go to the next level. This was another game that was very challenging, and to be honest, it kind of reminds me of the new cell phone app game Crossy Road, which my kids play because there's a Disney version of it. Anyway, this is another game that has beautiful music that just takes me back when I hear it. Here's a little clip of it. As you progressed in levels, nothing much changes, but different behavior and patterns of the cars and the turtles and the crocodiles and the logs. You gotta think, this is pretty violent. Smashing frogs on a road. I think this would be like the 83 equivalent of Grand Theft Auto. Anyway, Frogger, another classic. There you go. There were my top 5 games that I loved playing on the Colecovision in 1983. And of course I played them after 1983. And to be honest, I can't remember exactly when I got the Colecovision. Remember I got it for Christmas and I was super psyched. Because, like I mentioned, my parents' friends owned one and I was just enthralled by it. It just was my first experience with video games, even before the Atari. Because I didn't really have any friends. I don't... no use in hiding that fact, but I didn't have many friends growing up, and it wasn't until many years later that I started playing the Atari, and it felt like right after that Nintendo came out. The same kid got one. And it was a little bit afterwards that I finally got one. But these games, I mean, just watching this footage just took me back to a simpler time, unadulterated look at video games, but it was so seedy and oversaturated that it crashed. And unfortunately there were a lot of casualties due to that crash. So next time we get to ColecoVision, it'll be 1984's list of top 5, and unfortunately that was the last year that ColecoVision made anything for home video games. And just think, right around the corner in 1985 the NES was released. It's so weird when you think about it. When you look at the footage of games like this to where they went with the NES, it's just mind-boggling. But anyway, thanks for watching. This has been sentiMENTAL. Keep being rad, stay dorky, and I hope to see you next time. Peace! Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, hit the subscribe button for some more awesome videos. We also have a couple here on the side you might be interested in. And until next time, thanks for watching, keep being rad, and stay dorky.